There's no question that the best method of establishing a really good clovery sward is on a ploughed seedbed, a prepared seedbed, without using a cover crop, direct sowing in probably early April, or relatively early in the season when there's plenty of moisture in the soil. Not using any nitrogen, but obviously you have to have adequate P and K. Not using any post-emergence herbicide, because even the so-called clover-safe herbicides often do have some ingredients in them which damage the clover slightly. So ideally, any weed control in that situation would be done by topping, and that's perfectly good for controlling annual arable weeds. The problems that we've seen is farmers being inclined to sow late in the season. They're trying to direct sow late in the season, and it's quite clear that white clover and probably red clover as well does not establish well from autumn sowing or late summer sowing. And I would suggest that if you're really wanting a very good clovery sward by the spring of the following year, then the latest you should sow it is about the end of July. That is here in the northeast of Scotland. Further south you could possibly sow it a wee bit later. The problem is that white clover in particular is slow to establish, and by the time the winter starts, with clover sown in late August or into September, the clover seedlings only have 1 or 2 roots, and that is insufficient to anchor the seedling to the soil throughout the winter, where you might have frost and then thawing and frost and thawing, and you get this frost heave. So the plant is actually heaved out of the ground. It's just not sufficiently well developed root system to anchor it to the soil. I would be encouraging farmers to think about red clover for a very specific purpose, and that is for the silage situation. Red clover grows from a crown, therefore it is suitable for cutting. It is not suitable for grazing, certainly not intensive grazing. For a really productive red clover sward, 2 years and possibly 3 years would be the limit, I would say. I mean, the plants will last for longer than that, but in a practical farm situation where you're using machinery, you're grazing it, the plants will gradually die out, and I think you could probably get quite a good productive sward in the 3rd year, but I doubt if you could rely on it lasting much longer than that. But for that reason, I think the farmers should be aiming to sow relatively high seed rates of red clover for this specialist silage mixture, seed rates of 8 kilos a hectare, plus the companion grass species. The choice of red clover variety is important, because red clover can suffer from diseases and pests which white clover doesn't. Specifically, I'm referring to stem eelworm, which if you choose the wrong variety, a susceptible variety, can be completely devastating to the sward over a period of 2 or 3 years. It's quite a concern to me that people are getting extremely enthusiastic about red clover, and they're right to do so, but you have to be aware that you cannot grow red clover, at least I don't think it's advisable to grow red clover continuously in the same field year after year after year. Well, you can see that this is red clover I've got in my right hand here, and this is white clover I've got in my left hand, and you can see that they are completely different in terms of their growth habits. The red clover here it's got a deep taproot, it grows from a crown. The white clover grows from a stolon, a network of stolons which branch out. The red clover, because it's growing from this one single growth point, once this plant dies, as it surely will, there is nothing to fill that space other than probably weeds. So that's what makes red clover a short-lived species. Red clover is not suitable for hay. It's not suitable for grazing, I would say, not suitable for intensive grazing. It's ideal for silage. So we're looking at 2 cuts of silage or possibly 3 cuts of silage although the third cut could be difficult to achieve good fermentation, because you'd be doing that in September at a time of year when you can't wilt it very well. And then aftermath grazing ideally with lambs. I wouldn't recommend grazing red clover in the autumn with cattle, or indeed at any other time of the year with cattle. And of course, because of the estrogen risk, you wouldn't do it in the back end with ewes and lambs either. But it's fantastic for finishing lambs.
The farming system we have here is we produce early lamb, and then we finish beef off the grass later on in the summer. In that system we also grow cereals, 110 acres, but our main system is early lambs, and that's what we emphasise on, especially in the spring. We produce just over 1,000 lambs, fattened lambs, and then 135 beef cattle later on in the autumn. High sugar and clover works exceptionally well in our grazing system. It gives the clover gives us nitrogen, also improves the quality of the sward, giving more protein as well. Therefore, I would say categorically that you need clover, especially in our system.
The barley or the oats are undersown with a red clover ley, and of course that is down then for 3 or 4 years before it goes into swedes, and then from swedes to corn and undersown again. The red clover will only last here about 3 to 4 years. Sometimes we tend to graze it too hard, but excellent for fattening lambs. The clover will become more important in the future. With fertilizer prices going up, it's so important to produce our own nitrogen. And of course it's important to have the other indexes correct in the phosphate and the potash. Initially I was half afraid of grazing a red clover ley because of bloat. I've never had a problem. We've had no fertility problems by grazing red clover, because we tend not to tup the ewes on a red clover ley. It's as simple as that. We keep the red clover ley for fattening.